So this is Baruch Fleischman here at the Tikkun Elevator Colon. Let me get this book up here. It's the Jewish Astrology of Cosmic Science. Torah, Talmud, and Zohar works on spiritual astrology. Yaakov Kronenberg. I have to admit that as we start into astrology, you see all these things. Astrology is not such an easy thing to learn because there's lots of different parts to it. So it is the parts of the movements of the planets, the parts of the movements of the earth, the parts we have to do with the movements of our lives. But also it has to do with the energies that come into our lives, because all of these movements have roots, shroshim. And so therefore we have to pay attention to that. Now he's been on this part here where he's quoting actually the Talmud. The Talmud goes through the various different days of the week and how is it that the various different days of the week affect a person. Now that's very interesting. Why should that be? Because there were 7 days of creation and 7 days of the week. The word seven is not just a haphazard number. So we see that what happened in creation itself is manifest in the days of the week. That's one of the things that he taught us here. So we have to go all the way back to the very beginning of the reality in which we live. Now, let's go on, because he had said some different things, and he went through the various days of the week, and he talked about different characteristics of the days. One is that he talked about, say, the moon. What happens when a person should become a thief? That's what he said. The Talmud is not suggesting that a person born under the moon hour should become a thief. Now, let me just go over that phrase again. He says the noon hour. So most of us are used to the concept of the 12 astrological signs, but we always know them by the sun sign. That's what we call the sun sign. But astrologers really work on a person's ascendant. That is the moment in which he's born, because that's the person's starting place. So after the moment at which the person is born, everything else can follow, because that's where it's like a wheel of your life. That's where the wheel of your life begins. So he's coming over, so he says that under the moon. So if the moon, one of the days of the week refers to the moon. And if you were born under that day, then the Talmud suggests that person liable to become a thief. So he said the Talmud is not suggesting that a person born under the moon hour, so he said the moon hour, that is when during the daytime, the 24 hours of the day, when the moon has shlita, is in charge, should become, and it's a 2-hour period. So he said, become a thief. And my astrology teacher, he had a teacher by the name, I think his last name was Mason. And this person was a man of means. He was Hungarian, and he had a bookstore, a rare bookstore. And I don't know how Kronenberg found him. Rabbi Yaakov is just a regular person with an interest, but he did. And from him, he learned a tremendous amount. As my astrology teacher used to say, that whatever a person acquires in the wrong way, he will lose it. He can't hold on to it. But in any case, some people have a greater chance to succeed in doing wrong things. Let's say, for example, one who's born when Saturn ruled is likely to have his plans frustrated. Others say that it's the other way around, and that who's born under Saturn will be able to stop anyone who thinks against it. Saturn is the outer planet of the solar system. It is a smart planet, which can take care of itself. And anyone who tries to rise up against Saturn is not likely to be successful. One who is born when Jupiter rules, so again, we're going through the 2-hour periods of the day. As the Earth is moving, the constellations above us are moving as well. So he said that Jupiter is likely to become a righteous person. Said Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak, and it means righteous is doing good deeds. So one who's born under Jupiter, which is called usually Sagittarius or Pisces, is involved in doing good deeds. One who is born when Mars rules is likely to become a person who sheds blood. Mars is the color of red, the red planet, the color of blood. So he said Rav Ashi, such a person may become likely to become a person who sheds blood. Such a person may become either a bloodletter or a thug or a butcher or a surgeon. Said Rabbah, but I was born in Mars hour. Said Abaye, Master Rabbah, you do punish and kill since you are a judge. Rabbi Chanina, and he says, Rabbi Chanina says, your mazel, which you get from the planets, affects people in the area of how wise and wealthy you will be. And the people of Israel are affected from astrological planetary influence. Rabbi Yochanan says Israel has no astrological influence when they keep the commandments. And Rabbi Yochanan goes according to his reasoning, for Rabbi Yochanan said, where do you see that Israel has no astrologically oriented influence? And it is said in Jeremiah, so said God, don't learn from the ways of the nations, and don't fear the signs of heaven, for only the nations should fear them. They should be frightened, not Israel. Rav 2, so he says in Rav 2 that if you he says here that if you keep the Torah commandments, then the forces of the astrology can be changed. Now, I'm thinking that we've seen many times that we say that prayer works in the case of changing things that would normally happen to you. So he says on their own over, they should be frightened, not Israel, but for the Gentiles, they don't have this prayer. So he said, and Rav too said that Israel has no astrological influence. For Rav Yehuda said, where is it learned that Israel is not astrologically influenced? It is said about Abraham Avinu in Genesis, and God, took him out of planetary influence. Said Abraham mastered the universe. The Asram said like this: Ribono Shel Olam mastered the universe. The person of my house, the head servant Eliezer. This is back in the story of Abraham Avinu sending Eliezer, who was his head servant, is going to inherit me. God said to him, no, for the one who comes out of you, which will be Isaac, known Yitzchak in Hebrew, will inherit from you. He will be the one. Said he, Abraham, to him, master of the world, I looked in my astrology chart, and not likely to have a son. He said to him, get out of your astrological chart, for Israel has no astrological influence. So God said, what is your reasoning? That Jupiter is in the west, and this is a sign of no children. I will take Jupiter back and put it in the east, and you will have children. Now, let's go on just a little bit more. One of the later Kabbalists after the Gaon of Vilna, a Rebbe Yitzchak Chaver, a main disciple of the Gaon, said it is true that it is taught in our tradition that both Abraham and Sarah had reproductive problems and were barren, and neither of them could give birth. But God cured them and made it possible for them to produce children. And all the Jewish people came out of Abraham and Sarah. And Rabbi Chaver explains it as God recreating them into a new creation, and where they are not under the planetary influences. And the Talmud continues, and this is what is written, he put Jupiter in the east and called it, or structured it for his sake. So we're going to stop right here. We're at the time limit, or let's see, just a little bit more. Also, Shmuel said that Israel is not under the planetary influences, so everybody keeps to be saying this. So he said when they keep the commandments, the source of the Talmud says that Shmuel and Avla, who was a non-Jew, were sitting, and some people walked past them towards a lake. Said Avla to Shmuel, this person is going to the lake and will not come back. A snake will bite him, and he will die. Shmuel said, if he is a descendant of Israel, he will come back. And they sat down, and eventually he indeed came back. Avlet went to that man and asked him for his bag, and eventually he indeed came. Avlet went to the man and asked him for his bag, and threw it to the floor. And indeed a snake was found in it, which was cut into two pieces. Shmuel asked the man, what did you do to be saved from this snake? The person replied, every day we, the workers, collect bread and eat. Today I saw there was one of us who had no bread to contribute to our group. In other words, they pooled the bread together, and then they split it. I was embarrassed by this. I said to the group that I will collect the bread, so I said, I'll go collect the bread, and I pretended I received some bread from him, and I pretended I received from him bread, so he should not be ashamed. So Shmuel said to him, you did a good deed, and that saved you. And Shmuel declared, charity saves one from death. In Hebrew, it's called tzedakah tatzim amabis. Tzedakah saves you from death. In other words, charity overcomes the planetary influences. So this is something to keep in mind, and we'll learn along. This is Baruch Fleischman here at the Tikkun Elevator Kollel.